Hello, everyone. All right, it's a bit technical. We're going to have to shut off the YouTube. Hi, everyone. Welcome to our CX Asian Network webinar today. So excited that we have the global experts, as you can see right in front of you, to speak on the topic of how CX can differentiate in your organization. Now, for the audience, I understand that there are practitioners out there. There are also interest parties who are thinking about having CX as a part of your career advancement, an addition, or in the next change. This would be a good platform to ask the questions across the globe. We have experts from the UK, the USA, Australia, Singapore, France, but currently Sebastian is in Singapore. So you got, from all over all in one place. What a best platform for you to hear from the experts and an opportunity for you to ask the right questions as well. Now, so I'm going to do a quick round of introduction and ask each of the panelists to say a few words about themselves. Yen, would you like to go first?
Thank you so much, Francis, and it's such a pleasure to join you today and these esteemed colleagues from around the world. Ian Golding, founder member of the Customer Experience Professionals Association. I've been in the field of business improvement and customer experience for over 25 years. I know I don't look that old, but unfortunately it's true. And I have worked literally all over the globe, helping organizations to practically apply what I call the science of customer experience.
Thank you, Yen. Friska.
Hi, I'm Friska. I'm a change management consultant, coach, and trainer, and I've been in change and transformation for nearly a decade now. And yes, I don't look that old either, Ian, so I'm following your lead. And during my time, I've led change projects impacting up to 23,000 people across 6 of the 7 continents. I just haven't worked in Antarctica. And I've consulted to some of the biggest names in mining, engineering, and technology. So it's all about digital transformation, CX transformation, mergers and acquisitions, whatever the change may be. The common thread is that it's enterprise-wide change. Thanks.
Thanks, Friska. Very good. Hi, Sebastian.
Okay, so I'm Sebastian. I'm working for Lazada. So as we have people from all over the globe, I think I need to give a bit of introduction. Lazada is a key e-commerce player in Southeast Asia. We have presence in Singapore, Malaysia, Thailand, Vietnam, Indonesia, Philippines. Right now, I am the chief of staff for the customer care function. I've been there for about 4 years. And I think throughout my whole experience in Lazada, I've always gotten, the customer first mindset in the organization, and I've been driving quite a lot of change there. Prior to that, I was working in Paris, France, but also London at different positions because I always wanted to explore and to do more. So I used to work in banking, so I have a bit of experience there as well, but also in private equity. So I've experienced a lot of different things and brought that all together to Lazada to take the customer experience to the next level.
Wonderful. Thanks, Sebastian. Hi, Greg.
Hi, everybody. Greg Melia, CAE. I have the honor of serving as the CEO of the Customer Experience Professionals Association, which means that I get to work with Ian and Francis and 3,998 other CX professionals from around the globe to help share best practices and help you think about how you can grow your success personally and for your organization.
Thanks, Greg. Now, so you have heard that we have representation of the global experts from all over the world. Now, for the topic, I'd like to start perhaps a very high-level generic question first. Is what comes to your mind when you're first approached by me and say, hey, would you like to be in the panel that discuss about CX being the key differentiating factor for organizations? It's a very high-level question, but what first comes into your mind when this pops up, and what would that be? Would you like to start?
I don't mind starting. As you know, Francis, I've always got an opinion on things. But because it's not a dissimilar question to the one that you asked me about 2 years ago, before you managed to convince me to come out to Singapore to talk about it, because customer experience is something that has been around for a long time. In fact, as Greg has heard me say many times, it's always existed. But this year is a very important year because it's the 10th anniversary of what I consider to be the formalization of customer experience as a profession, because this is the 10th anniversary of the foundation of the Customer Experience Professionals Association. But despite the fact that the profession has been around for 10 years, there is still a significant lack of awareness and a significant lack of knowledge and understanding of what I call the science that sits behind it. And so I think it's really important that whenever we are able to, we can come together collaboratively across different regions to educate and share knowledge and give people not just the understanding of what it is, but also that additional spark to inspire them to want to do something with it. So I don't need too much arm twisting to get involved in something like this, because sharing knowledge is so important.
Yeah, that's great, Ian.
Yeah, I have to add to that I love the way that you phrased that question, to really think about the competitive advantage. It's great that people are talking about customer experience all the time, but too often they're using it as a one-off unicorn story. And they're talking about a person who had a great customer service incident, or they're talking about a wonderful gesture that was made by a company. But for CX to be a competitive advantage for an organization, it has to begin with the culture. It has to have the alignment of the data and the systems, and it has to have that science and management that Ian was speaking about. And heck, what else was I going to do at 1 a.m. other than have my cat come and visit me?
Yeah, by the way, guys, Greg is dialing in at 1 a.m. from the US. Thanks, Greg.
I'll go next. I think change management and CX has only come into the fore both in the past decade. There's still quite a bit of cloak and dagger mystery around the two disciplines. Change management is often thrown into the same bucket as training and communications, which is not. I mean, like Ian said, both disciplines have a lot of strategy and thinking and science behind it. So I wanted to take this opportunity to better showcase that. And in preparation for this webinar, I was just digging up a few stats and why CX is going to be critical, and it enables companies to differentiate themselves, because there was a Salesforce study that found that 67% of customers say they'll pay more for a great customer experience. And the single most biggest factor that it impacted their decision to buy was the overall enjoyment for the experience. So we know that this is going to be increasing in importance. And last year showed us the importance of it, because we that physical element was taken away from us. So digital customer experience will rise in prominence for this year. So great to be part of the discussion.
Thanks, Friska.
Yeah. Okay, maybe on my side. So the reason why I wanted to come here today is really to exchange about the topic, because I think within Lazada, we are doing a great job. But if we don't look outside of your company, this is not a great way to benchmark. So while we have very good way to track this with NPS, how do we do versus competition, I really wanted to take this opportunity to exchange with you guys. I think if we take a step back and look at customer experience and why it is important, I really believe that, okay, first of all, customer experience is very blurry because it has no beginning and no end. There is no way, it's very difficult to quantify. And this is one of the reasons why it's so difficult to push and to demonstrate that this is the way to go. If we take a very, very simple example, whenever you go to a restaurant, your waiter is here to help you, to assist you, to serve you. If he doesn't do that well, you might not come back. But, as the restaurant owner, you need to do it. You need to train your staff to do those few steps that will give a good experience to your customers. How do you measure the return on investment in doing this training? This is very difficult because you don't know whether it's effective or not. Customer experience is a strategy. It is a long-term strategy. And whenever we think about it on offline versus online, personally, Lazada, e-commerce, I'm more an online kind of guy, but so that's how it is. As I see it, customer experience is a long-term strategy because in the long term, it is cheaper to retain your customers than to acquire them.
Sebastian,
yeah,
you reminded me of an experience about the restaurant, because recently I went to a restaurant and I didn't make a booking, so I walk in, and certainly it was Friday night, it was full. And the first person I engaged with was like pretty much, I'm sorry, and very apologetic that I could come back again. But as soon as some second person step in, and later we found out it was the owner, you can find that the attitude is so different. The second one, the owner, is trying to find a solution, in very creative, in how about this, how about that, could you come back later, would you mind sitting here? But plenty of suggestions, which make at the end she got the deal. So the ownership, of course, is key, but of course, the whole experience of me continue to stay on and come back again, that gave me a whole. She had just won a loyal customer, and Friska, thanks for the statistics as well. In fact, yesterday I shared with the roundtable that recently there was a McKinsey study that shows that only 4% of the executives are understanding that the return on customer experience investments are really worthy of them continue to do that. And that's something I'll touch on that soon in the next question. And also, only 20% of the surveys done actually flowed up to the management. Finally, less than 15% of the management in companies that does a lot of customer experience survey, customer service survey, they only less than 50% are confident that they are able to take the information in to do real decision making in real time. So that leads to my next question here. It will be regarding investments. What would be your view, a conversation that you would have with a senior executive of an organization to convince him how he can look at a return on investment on customer experience initiatives, projects, resources? What would that be, that advice from your end?
So I won't always go first, but just to give everyone else some food for thought as I describe this, because even Greg hasn't heard me describe what I'm about to say. That most organizations around the world, when they think about the way they quantify the benefit of focusing on a customer experience strategy, their immediate thought is to think about VOC, or voice of the customer. And most businesses, most business leaders will have some semblance of understanding that a VOC mechanism, whether it be net promoter score or whether it be customer satisfaction, is a sensible thing to have. But to your point, what does that mean to the organization? Now, when I talk to people about customer experience measurement, I actually talk about 3 voices of measurement, as you know, Francis, and I talk about voice of the customer, voice of the employee, and voice of the process. And it's that combination of measurement that should enable an organization to drive continuous improvement. The voice that's been missing, just in terms of the way this is articulated, and so this is a relatively new thing for me in describing measurement. The 4th voice is voice of the business. And I think we need to become much more overt in allowing leaders to understand that customer experience is not something separate to the organization, but what we're trying to do is to provide a fact-based approach to improving the experience that then results in an improvement in the voice of the business, the strategic business metrics. And that financial return that will impact that voice is in 3 forms. It is in revenue generation, which is to Sebastian's point, the long-term financial return from improving the customer experience. But the short to medium-term financial return comes through cost reduction and cost avoidance. Eliminating the things that are going wrong in the customer journey will improve customer perception, improve employee perception, but it will ultimately also cost you less to deliver the experience. And it's so important for business leaders to understand this, because I think many think that customer experience is all about generating more revenue, but it is, but that's the long term. And because so many organizations think short term, they never get there and they don't see the results in the long term. And so they give up. So it's so important that they understand that relationship. And, it's fantastic to have someone with Friska's expertise as part of this panel, because change management is all about getting people to understand how we can do things differently that drive that demonstrable change. And so it's brilliant to have her perspective, and everyone else's on this call too.
Thanks, Ian. I might add to that point then about, companies get despondent that they're not getting the results. I echo what you said. This is a long-term game, and the short-term thinking leads to long-term fixing. Like now more than ever, it's so much easier to go to a competitor. Like everybody just hops to competitors all the time. And so investing in this now will yield dividends, not tomorrow, not next month, not next year, but over the long term. And in terms of measuring the ROI of CX transformations, well, from a change management perspective, there's three elements. You measure individually, departmentally, and organizationally. And the metrics depend on the type of CX initiative that's being launched. It could be compliance to a new customer service strategy. It could be the number of touch points that are executed to reach a particular segment. It could be the satisfaction of the customer with those touch points. So, having a coverall blanket statement of ROI is impossible. So it would be dependent on sector and the type of initiative. What I do want to stress is have a combination of leading and lagging indicators, and make sure that it's you get a holistic snapshot, so you haven't got blinkers on.
Okay, I have to say that I'm very much aligned with what Ian and Friska said. I mean, I'm French, so usually I disagree with everything, especially with people from the UK, but I'm very much aligned. I think today, whenever we look at customer journey, customer experience, the first thing we can do to get also, quick results and to demonstrate that this is useful is what your management want to hear. Cost reduction. Okay, what is generating friction today that is generating contact that you can avoid? So it's cost avoidance, cost reduction, fairly easy. I think the toughest part is on everything else that you have along your consumer journey, for which you don't have good ground-based metrics to monitor the experience that are making you lose your customers. This is churn rate or repurchase rate. Why do people come back, or why don't they come back? For this, we are, I think, lacking a lot of data, and it requires fine-tuning a lot which metric we look at to understand the consumer journey. And this goes along all the parts of the consumer journey. This needs to be broken down, and this is a very tough and time-consuming exercise to get it right and to see a business impact out of that. So it is easier to start, I think, with cost reduction, because this is what people will see. So for anyone starting on customer experience, this is where I would start. And then in parallel, I would work on long-term initiatives that will allow you to capture the missing information and data points that will enable you to demonstrate that customer experience is the way to go over the long term.
Yeah. As I listen to the comments, I really think they come together on that one point that Ian was adding to his agenda, the voice of the business or the business objectives overall. Sometimes as customer experience conversations go, I think we get misled into just thinking about the activities that are listed as customer experience competencies. And we create more activity that doesn't have a clear tie to the business goal. So we really need to think, well, why are we mapping this customer journey? And what are we hoping to accomplish in that? And for those that are listening in, I love that we've had that word cost reductions come up a couple of times. I want to point out to people that in addition to fixing problems that cost a lot to correct later, cost reductions also come by making sure that we're putting our energies in the right places. if we found out that you were making a product adaptation or delivering a service that your customers didn't care about, that's cost. That's inefficiency, and really listening to our customers can make sure that we're setting our priorities in the same place that our customers are.
I'm going to add again on the cost reduction comment, because it sort of struck me when Jens first mentioned, because CX investment is not sometimes actually spending more, it's spending at the right place. So for leaders in this call comes tuning in, it's not about spending more. You could be taking the resources from places where there's no or little impact on customers to the places where there's huge impact with the customers. And in fact, when you do the alignment, there's often a process of realignment of resources and cost reduction as well, because you're reducing spend on something that's not effective. So this question is for the benefit of CX leaders here on the question on structure. As I think it was Ian that mentioned that while it has been 10 years that CX has been coming on stream around the world globally, making an impact, the awareness is still very low. So we begin to see there has been an uptick of that in reflecting on the roles I see it a lot in financial sectors, insurance especially, banks, e-commerce for sure. Most of them have CXO, customer experience chief officer, those roles that are reflecting that importance of that. But there are some other industries that also have not really come that way yet. So with that on a structure side, what would be your perspective and advice to organizations who have not thought of that or the importance of that, and how do they structure, and what kind of structure should they be thinking about? Maybe this time around we'll go.
I was going to say I'm holding back because I don't want to go for.
Yeah.
I will go from someone else. Let's go from Greg.
Sure. I think when we think about customer experience professionals, we're thinking about individuals that act as catalysts across the organization, and really as change leaders to champion the point of view of the customer. That's really important in organizations, because your CEO has likely already charged somebody to be really good at marketing, to be really good at production, to be really good at sales. And if any of those gets overdeveloped and loses sight of what the other department needs to have a successful handoff, you lose that buy-in and you lose that experience from the customer. So having somebody at the C-suite level that is charged with playing that voice of the customer through a CX responsibility, I think is critical. And it's not about telling other people what to do. It's about being a coach and an aid to those other departments to help make sure that everybody works smoothly, because ultimately the customer is going to experience everything from marketing and branding and PR through billing and accounting. So we need to make sure that everyone is united in making sure those customers stay happy.
That's great.
Yeah. If I may chip in here, I agree with you. I think, but I think to make sure people actually do it, I think it must be a direction from the top. And today, I think most companies now are driving performance in their companies by setting KPIs to their teams. What is often or always missing is how do they balance their core metrics with consumer experience metrics. I think today this is what I've seen being missing in most organizations. And the second point that is also missing is that today I think most of organizations, whenever they name a CXO, they hope that by having one person or one small entity in the group to represent customer experience, it will help them drive the change. It doesn't work like that. You need a top-down approach to set up key consumer metrics at all levels of the organization. The CXO is one of them whose role is to do this continuous improvement all the time, which means that you will be fully dedicated to this. But in all other organizations, commercial, HR, finance, everywhere, they need to be involved and to have metrics that will reflect on consumer experience. Otherwise, it will not work. I think consumer experience is a company culture mindset. It is not just one small entity in the company.
Thank you. Friska.
So I echo Sebastian's point. Any significant transformation, whether it's CX, whether it's digital, whatever, it needs to have that top-down support and it needs to have the executive visibility. So, when we think about how we make customer decisions now, before we even walk into a store, most likely we'll check out some reviews on Google, on eBay, and then it's impacted by our in-store experience, it's impacted by what our friends think, and then the post-purchase experience. And so the totality of the brand experience really does influence who wins and who's the woeful. And so it needs someone with a continuous eye on the prize. And another reason why I think CX and change management go hand in hand is both have empathy at its very root of the core. So if you make any change in CX, it's going to be changing your employees because it'll impact how they engage with their customers. And so both, I think, need to be at CXO, but much like to Sebastian's point, roadmaps need to be developed for each function of the business that clearly set out what they need to do differently. Because CX is not just the CXO's job, it's actually everybody's job, but in practical ways that looks and feels different. And people yet don't understand that. They think it's just, that's the marketing team's job. And so we need to make it real for everybody in the business.
Thank you, Friska.
And just to add, I agree with everything everyone's saying, but if I summarize my perspective, 2 words come to mind: acknowledgement and education. What I mean by acknowledgement is that for an organization to be able to transform itself, to change itself, to Friska's point, there needs to be an acknowledgement that there is a need to change. And very often, whilst all of these things are blindingly obvious to us, to leaders, to those running a business, it isn't as obvious to them. And what we need is for them to be able to acknowledge that we cannot stay as we are. Now, again, it sounds so obvious, but when we think about organizations that fail, they fail because they fail to adapt. They fail to adapt to the changing environment around them. And that change is usually down to the fact that they haven't had the information, or they haven't come to the conclusion that we cannot carry on in the same trajectory.
Now, the VOC.
Yes,
that's fine.
But that's very often driven by that short-term focus. It comes back to that again, that shareholders want, money straight away, and they don't want to wait. Now, the other issue is that second word was education. Again, there is a still 10 years in to customer experience formally recognized as a profession, a huge lack of knowledge and understanding as to what customer experience actually is and the competencies that sit behind it. This is still, for many, seen as a soft, fluffy, ethereal thing. And, as Francis, I've shared knowledge with over 20,000 people on this subject in the last 9 years. Less than 2% of the people that I've shared knowledge with have been on the C-suite or equivalent. And as I say in my training classes, why is that? Is it because they know all of this already? Is it because they don't care? Is it a combination of the two? Among other things, I'm the course director for customer experience for the Chartered Institute of Marketing in the UK. The most prominent marketing body in the world has always had customer experience on its curriculum, but they never taught it. And they never taught what it meant, and this is still the fundamental problem. So, and that, again, coming back to your very first question, that's why conversations like this are so important, because we need to keep pushing and pushing and pushing to convince people that never stopping learning is a good thing. And we need leaders to learn more.
Absolutely. That's a great point about learning. Now, I was just off this morning with another client of mine talking about learning and the importance of learning. One of the videos that I showed was being good enough is dead, because your competition is scoring towards perfection. Customers will just switch with just additional benefit at any time. So the barrier of entry is also very low for other businesses. So great snapshot. But before I forget, now the audience here, please do send in your questions. You don't have to wait to the end of the session to send. We'll welcome the questions. You can reflect, and I'll be taking them at the end of the session. Now, on the structural question of CX, whether they are being highlighted is, while it's important, but it's more important that every individual of the organization play a role in CX. But what I found was interesting is that very few and very seldom the organizations actually make a point of letting every individual know that the task of the day or the week or the hour link eventually to the experience of the customer. And there's an impact to that, except that sometimes could be a 5-6 degree difference. But if that guy were to see 6 degree difference to the impact of the customer, they will make the task so much more meaningful. And why he knows that if I don't do it well, it will impact 5 other degrees. Eventually, it will impact the customer. So my question is this: that I'm going to make it a bit difficult, right? To you, because there are 2 points that I heard it. One way we do is storyboarding, right? Storyboarding these 6 degree through training. Another one Sebastian has mentioned about giving the right metrics. That itself is also very tricky. Besides these 2, or you can jump on these 2 as well. What other ways can you think the organization can help to have this individual know the task of the day and the hour to link to the impact of the customers?
So I was going to pretend to freeze, but no. So again, these are all brilliant questions, and you're painting a picture of the sad reality, and I use the word sad intentionally, that most organizations today are still task-led, not customer-led. So they're not giving people time to think in the interests of the customer because they're too focused on getting people to execute the tasks that they're measuring them against. And so this comes actually back to something that Friska mentioned a few minutes ago about the underlying principle of both customer experience and change management being empathy. And, I completely agree. I've always called that the most important underlying principle of customer experience. But for an organization to empathize, it can only be done if people are thinking. And if we give people time to think and act in the interests of the customer. And regrettably, because we're so obsessed with tasks and doing stuff, people aren't thinking. And it's not because they don't want to, but it's because they're, to a degree, fearful of what happens if I don't deliver the task and achieve the number that I'm being measured on. And so ultimately, it's almost like a self-perpetuating cycle of doom because we can't get out of it. And people are very reluctant to challenge. And that becomes more extreme when you then overlay national cultures. Obviously, as you know, because in more submissive cultures where people are much more comfortable taking instruction, that means they just do what they're told. And, they won't challenge what they've been told, either because they're scared of the consequences of challenging or they don't know they can. So, fundamentally, we need a huge mindset shift and a huge acknowledgement that the most successful organizations in the world are the ones that do give their people the ability to think. And by giving them the time and ability to think, they're able to actually help their organizations differentiate, not just on the products and services, but on the whole experience.
So I'm going to share what I did to really drive and bring a digital transformation to life for a very large mining company. And it's grounded in empathy. So first of all, I had to inspire teams and employees to show them what the ideal customer experience looked like. What customers really want, what will really deliver those benefits and the organizational outcomes that we're feverishly working towards. And then number 2 is that I showed them the current state. So what the current customer/employee experience looked like, warts and all. In that way, they could see for themselves that business as usual is not going to be good enough. It's not going to be good enough to retain your customers, to retain your top performers. And so I first had to get them to accept that they were part of the problem. And then I generated their buy-in by asking them to be part of the solution. Involvement and participation creates commitment. And so that would be my advice to get people on board with CX transformation. Show them what the rosy, 10 out of 10 picture looks like, show them the current state, and invite them to co-create how to bridge that gap together.
I love how this conversation is unfolding, because it represents something that I think is a key for everyone who's watching to understand. There is not one way to do customer experience. In fact, you are at your best when you blend together these different elements to bring together that focus on the customer. Another way, Francis, that comes to mind, my second career, my second job along the way was actually on the opening staff of a Ritz-Carlton hotel. And Ritz-Carlton has every employee memorize their credo. That bakes right in the idea that we're going to meet even the unexpressed wishes and needs of the guest. And they focus on that idea of employee empowerment, ladies and gentlemen serving ladies and gentlemen. So culture and metrics and bringing people closer to the customer and experiencing that data, these are all parts of the mix. The real question is, how do you make sure that you choose the mix and the support that makes the right financial choice for your business, in your area, because you can't afford to do it all. That's when we end up having that question, where's our ROI?
So I've disappeared for a reason, because I just, Greg has triggered something in me. And the word trigger is an important word because, again, coming back to what Friska said as well, if we want people to think, we've got to find a way of giving them a trigger to remind them to do it. And, the Ritz-Carlton is, in my opinion, and Greg knows this, one of, if not the most customer-centric organizations in the world, but they always have been. So it's intuitive to the people that work there. But if you're in a legacy business where it isn't, we've got to find a way of doing it. And one of the stories that I always share is Jeff Bezos's empty chair at the table. And if you haven't heard those listening haven't heard the story, Jeff Bezos, when he founded Amazon, whenever they had a meeting, they had an empty chair at the table, the empty chair to represent the customer. And the reason Jeff wanted that is because that was the trigger. We've got to remind ourselves of it. And lots of organizations have heard this. And I just want to show you an example of a company that copied it. I've worked with a bank in Eastern Europe for many years, Budapest Bank in Hungary, and I have one of their customer chairs here. Now, even Francis has never seen that. I don't think you've seen this before, Greg, but this is their customer chair, and it even has arms on. All right. And please don't ask me to translate the Hungarian, but it says something like, are you thinking and acting in the interests of the customer? And the reason I think it's important to share this is that this doesn't have to be expensive. This doesn't have to be complicated. But what that chair does, because every meeting room, every bank branch has this chair in it, and the point is that that's to remind them. Because we forget there are so many things going on. We need a reminder. And a little trigger like that can make all the difference.
I need to get Laura
100%.
to send one of those chairs to me.
I'm sure I can arrange that for you.
Well,
And sorry, go ahead. And I said, Ian, and when we're talking about triggers, that's a very effective change management approach as well to reinforce a change in behavior. Like when we think about our Outlook calendars, those handy 15-minute pop-ups saying you've got a meeting soon. How many of us would have forgotten to go to a meeting if it wasn't for that? The same logic applies to get people to adopt more customer-centric behaviors. And when we think about apps such as Couch to 5K, which as its name suggests, it's for couch potatoes to run their first 5K, And Duolingo, one of the most effective foreign language learning apps on the market. Why are these apps best of breed in their industries? It's because they are so generous with the tummy tickles. They reward you with positive quotes, motivations, reminders. And this is what we need to do if we're trying to transform an entire CX function in an organization.
And that's a perfect piece. Is something we all need to think about. Is that customer experience, in addition to the people and the culture, it really requires you to have a strong data management system. To have those pieces out there. But I think a mistake that people often make is they let the data system begin to control what's going on. And instead of saying, we want to use this process as a tool to better understand our customers, all of a sudden they turn around and start thinking, okay, how do we raise this particular score? Or how do we get a stronger survey response rate? That's not the goal. The goal is to drive those business outcomes based on a customer perspective.
Yeah, I would like to also add on what Ian was saying earlier. Okay, I think, yes, CX, if it needs to be driven, needs to have KPI shared by all the companies. This is what was established, right? I think to get there, what is important is to show the importance of having a good CX. I think today there are a few metrics to measure that. And the importance to have the buy-in from your C-suites can be done by showing where you stand versus your competitor. Let's say you use the NPS, Net Promoter Score. If you're able, with this very short survey to ask, are you also, I don't know, in my case, shopping at your competitor, which competitor is it, and what score would you give it, or how likely are you to recommend it? It gives you a very good benchmark on where you stand in your market. By doing this, we also know with the NPS that it measures the engagement of people with your brand, with your company. It measures the loyalty. If you're able to see that, your NPS is lower than competitor or that you don't have enough promoters, it means that, of course, you have an issue. But this can be the trigger point to give your different team across your organization NPS or other engagement metrics that will help drive your customer experience. And another way to do that is by making sure you have a strong VOC function. This is what we said already as well. I think this, if it's not being shared by the VOC, if you don't share actual customer experience, people do not realize. We were mentioning earlier about the REITs. Yes, it's a very good point. I think what we did here at Lazada I think it was 2 years ago, to make our customer service agent understand the importance of customer service, we brought them into a 4-star restaurant. So in a 4-star hotel, in a restaurant, to show them, hey, this is the quality of service that you get whenever you go to a 4-star. This is what we want to do for our own brand, and this is how we should do it. Also, I think, Ian, you were saying that people need to have dedicated time to, free their headspace to think about customer experience. I think you're absolutely right, but also as soon as people start to understand the importance of customer experience and they have it as a KPI, they make time to do it. There is something very funny that I trust in, that is called task dilution. If I give you one task and 2 weeks to do it, you will do it in 2 weeks. If I give you one task and 2 days to do it, you will tell me, oh, 2 days is a bit short, but you will do it still. So you still have many more things you can accomplish if you ask a bit more from your people, and this is part also of their self-interest.
I like that part, Sebastian, about time boxing. In fact, when I do a lot of Agile and Scrum training, time boxing is a key principle of Agile. And to your point, you have to time box people so that they get very focused and they produce somewhat the results close to what you want. And the thing is this, in Agile, you don't have to be perfect. You don't want to be, because you know that you're going to come back and do it again with more information, the change of marketplace. Now, and I hear from the panelists here, I like the concept of, high and low, wide and skinny, which we talk about on the high, conceptually give them time to think, allowing them space. And then we go down to deep low, which is talk about specific KPIs like Sebastian mentioned. But I have an observation that because organizations are driving and cranking so efficiently that every rose has been squeezed. Human beings has been squeezed never before to do so much with so little. In a way, it's a good thing. It's high productivity. But what are the downside I noticed potentially it has resulted in is that they are measured today. Look, my KPI is to drive this metric of producing 100 pieces of this, just to be simple. So while I understand and have time to think that this 100 pieces of this is one of the million parts that the customer will drive eventually in a car, which he has to be happy with the car. The driving experience is not even about the car. He just want to get from A to B in a comfortable, environment. And my one piece is that I produce, and my KPI is measured on that one piece. It's then very hard for me to say, okay, he has great experience in the car, but I don't get paid for it. I don't get rewarded. I don't see the line of sight to that. So they then come back again to be like this again, to focus to produce the 1,000 pieces only. So unfortunately, this is a sad reality of what we see in the productivity enhancement. Now, so with that, I want to steer the question towards the individual. Just now, I have a couple of questions on the organization. Now when we speak to the individual who are looking at CX as a professional career, when I was approached, I told them this: look, even the organizations that you are applying, that you want to join, may not have a CX department or CX, focus on CX. Does not matter, because you demonstrating that you have a very good understanding, and if you have a certification in CCXP, you can join anything, because CX drives from marketing, sales, operations, delivery, logistics, everything, right? Because there's a part to play overall for the customer experience. That would be my advice to them when these questions comes about. What would be yours?
Do you want to go first, Greg, as the
Sure.
as the guardian of the professional association? It would feel right for you to comment first.
Thank you, the Duke of Chester, for granting me the time of the floor. This is a fantastic time for people to be looking at a career in customer experience. If you go out and do a search on the internet at the moment, you'll see that globally there's more than 50,000 job openings at the moment that have the term customer experience in it. And that is only the ones that list that. As Francis points out, there's also that opportunity to join in a marketing department, or in a executive department, or in a customer success or a customer service role, and to elevate it into this holistic discipline of working across the organization. I think for those that are watching, if you're interested in looking at things, visit cxpa.org. If you're a student, take a look at the higher ed section of our website. We've identified more than 50 colleges and universities that offer customer experience training at everything from the undergraduate to master's level, or postgraduate executive education. If you are an individual, go ahead and look at the CCXP outline and ask yourself on each of the things that you would be tested on, have I done this before? Or is this something I need to pick up a book and read about? Or is this something that I should ask a mentor to help me with? But those are some great ways for you to start to take control of your career.
And as the practitioner, to follow on from what Greg's saying, customer experience is something that many have probably been involved in without necessarily realizing. And being of the mind that actually what you do is now a recognized bona fide profession is actually a very important thing. When I first came across Bruce Temkin, one of the co-founders of the association, I was a practitioner on the inside of a corporate organization. and this is 2008. And I had customer experience in my job title, but I thought I was the only one. And I know it sounds ridiculous now, but I thought it was just me, and I was being bullied and patronized and belittled on the inside of my organization. And then when I came across Bruce, it was just a remarkable cathartic situation to suddenly realize I'm not alone. And there are lots of people doing what I'm doing. And it was a hugely critical, pivotal moment in my career. But the guidance I would give to anyone is that you're not alone. But doing what we do as a customer experience professional, but also just with a lens to Friska as well, because change management is just as complex as customer experience itself. This is a very lonely thing to do. This is a very difficult thing to do, changing the nature of the way an organization thinks and acts. And, as a result, it is so important that we know that there are many others out there who are going through the same thing. That's one of the wonders of an association like the CXPA, because it is a family of like-minded people. But what I would say is that if this is something that you see as your professional future, it is a combination of two things. It is a combination of head and heart. Many professions, it's about the head, but customer experience isn't like that. You don't do this because you want to get a huge salary, now hopefully that might come, but you do this because it's in here. If it isn't in here, then this is probably not the profession for you, if I'm being brutally honest about it. That's what defines, in my opinion, a customer experience professional. And I've not really lobbied, but I've said for many years that at some point I will convince Greg to add an additional competency to the descriptor of a CX professional, because that additional competency is courage. We need to have the courage, persistence, sheer bloody mindedness to keep going, irrespective of what's being thrown at us. End of preach, by the way. That's the preacher.
You're getting off your soapbox now, Ian? You're done?
Yeah, I've stopped, just to confirm.
I just wanted to add to that point. This really is hearts and mind stuff. And, being more human-centric, being more empathetic, it's never going to steer you wrong, because, we have to practice physical distancing, social distancing, not emotional distancing. We need to keep connected to each other, our people, and our customers, right? So uncertain times call for leaders, and there's been a strong and permanent shift, I think, in emotional leadership. So empathy is a key CEO attribute today, and I think it'll set the tone for this year even more. So those are my 2 cents. Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah, I agree. I think also, yes, CX is really a mindset. I mean, you can try to get it, but if it's not heart and mind, I don't think you will ever succeed over the long time. I think it was Greg mentioning that there are about 50,000 jobs mentioning customer experience. I think this is really under-evaluated, because today people don't know what is customer experience. It doesn't mean that they don't do it. This is, to your point, Ian, I was doing customer experience without knowing it. It's just, yes, I wanted to improve everything to help the customers. Yeah, customer experience. You just do it without knowing you're doing it. And I think this is quite to the point where today a lot of companies are trying to do it without having the proper framework, and that it doesn't reflect on their job description.
I was just thinking through that in my career, when I went through engineering, marketing, analysts, sales, management, you name it, there's not one role, a department that I cannot think of that linking to the customer experience. They are so intimately related to the outcome we want. Because at the end of the day, most organizations, what do they stand for? They stand to please delight their customers, keep loyal customers, increase bottom line, top line, And all these are impacted solely by the customers who has given the success to these organizations. So therefore, and if I were to put up an ad, or I would interview someone for any roles, could be marketing role, could be sales role, could be even an operation role. If someone in the interview will be able to articulate very clearly in the understanding of the job, the role, even with the expectations, and link it very clearly to the outcome of the customers, this will often impress management, anyone that say, wow, this guy clearly understands beyond the scope. He has the ability to understand what the outcome that the organization wants to achieve. And with that, often stands out very special and high up in the interview ranking. Right, we're coming up to the hour. We have very good in time. Therefore, I really want to thank the panelists here. Really, for some of you, especially Greg, still at 1 or 2 a.m. in the morning. Thank you, Greg. Really love that. And for the representation from across almost all continents. Now, we will do this every quarter minimum, and Hesed has been appointed as the Asia Pacific partner with CXPA to disseminate and to bring up the level of awareness of CX. So you see a lot more of us having these webinars, and hopefully when the pandemic is over, we'll be doing exciting live events where people can really meet and have a proper handshake across. And that's also part of customer experience, isn't it? So with that, thank you and good night to everybody and a very good afternoon. See you soon.
Thank you so much, Francis. Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.